Hi everyone, I'm excited to be back with you guys digitally. Sorry I couldn't be with you in person. I hope y'all had a good evening. Today we are focusing on the evidence for evolution, which is embryology and biochemistry. We're going to finish up our brochure notes that we started on Wednesday and look at some pieces of evidence for this. So today you have Friday's Pirate Prep, which is a throwback, and I would like for you to do the bonus. Since I'm not there, I would like for you to turn in your Pirate Prep from this week for me to check in and see how your learning is going. Okay, so yesterday you guys looked at an evolution handout, and this is basically just a summary of what you learned. I have a couple pieces of evidence on the left side, and our task is to decide which statement falls, or the statement, and see which type of evidence it would fall under. And we can only choose one option. So I'm going to focus up here on the first one. The very first statement says, in the earliest stages of development. So that's kind of important. Tail and gill slits can be seen in fish, birds, rabbits, and mammals. So if they're talking about earliest stages of life, we're talking about pre-born, if we'll just be very generic, depending on what type, how they're born. So let's just go ahead and write ourselves a little note. We are talking about an embryo, which is today's lesson. The second evidence says similarities in the forelimbs of bats, penguins, and lizards. Now, forelimbs are our structures, right? So we looked at this yesterday. They have structures, but their function, so they're telling us that it's similar, but their function is not. And so, I mean, we have a bat, penguins, lizards that can crawl, monkeys that can do whatever they do, climb on trees, jump around, open things with their thumbs, right? So they definitely have different functions. So at some point, they had to have had a similar ancestor because the structures are similar. So we're going to go homologous. The forelimbs, again, talking about a structure of flightless birds. So here we have a structure that is similar. And because we're looking at birds, we know that they're going to be coming from the same ancestor. So this one doesn't really give us much information, but because of that similarity in structure, instead of the different limbs being able to do the same function, we're going to go homologous on that one. DNA and RNA comparisons indicate descent from a common ancestor. So we know DNA is genetic code. And so that is what gives our bodies the information in order to build our proteins. And again, this is today's lesson. But because we know DNA is synonymous with genetics, let's go ahead and say that they are comparing their genetics, which we are going to call biochemistry. All right, and then we have bird and butterfly wings. They have the same function, but now their structures are different. So they have no common ancestry, and so we're going to go analogous for that one. And our last one is a body structure reduced in function. So reduced in function sounds like they no longer need it, but they may have been used in the ancestor. So this sounds like our pelvic whalebone that we were talking about yesterday. So that'll be our vestigial structures. Okay, so this is a past EOC question. It says a scientist is constructing an argument to support the claim that humans, birds, turtles, lizards, and penguins share a common ancestor. The scientist is using the diagram shown to support her argument. And then the question is just asking simply what type of evidence. So when you see this diagram, the first thing you need to look at is what is the diagram showing you. So here I see all four limbs of these animals which means we are looking at a structure of their body, right? So I'm not looking at what the embryo looks like in development, which again, we're going to get into today. So that one's out. I'm not looking at DNA or any kind of sequencing, which we are actually going to do this today as well. So those two are out, and I'm going to go comparative morphology as her piece of evidence that she's using to support the argument that they have a common ancestry. Okay, so the next thing we need to be doing is our 4 pieces of evidence. Yesterday, we went over comparative morphology. So evidence number 3 is comparative embryology. Okay. So open your brochure up, and we should have this one at the top right. It's very, very simple, and then we'll just kind of look at some examples as an interactive. So evidence number 3 for the theory of evolution is comparative embryology. We are going to be comparing embryos of organisms to determine how closely related they are. So very similar to the opening question, that we have slits as embryos that then do not develop fully once born for humans. And so we're going to be looking at that similarity in the embryo stage versus what they would look like as a young animal or an adult. So you should have picked up this half sheet right here, the embryology sheet. It's a quarter sheet. It's very, very small. Now we have to use this interactive guess the embryo that is posted on Google Classroom. So we do need your Chromebooks. So I'm going to get you started on this. But once you open this diagram, it's going to have in the very beginning the answers to what's up here at the top of the quarter sheet. And then exactly where this is shown in the screen, there are 4 squares at the top. And what's going to happen is they're going to pop up an image of an embryo, the same ones that you see on your quarter sheet. And you kind of just guess which organism you think that embryo was. And then when you find your answer, you will record it. Very interesting stuff, because you might think it's something that is actually not what it is. And so when you get done with this, you are going to tape this into your notebook. I believe we're going after Darwin and Lamarck's theory of evolution. And so this will be labeled 6C in your notebook. So pause the video, go ahead and grab your Chromebook if you don't have it, open up Google Classroom and the PBS interactive, and it should look like this. Guess the embryo. Just for sake of time for this video, if you open this, it's going to have the very first answer there. All animals start as a single fertilized cell. Okay, so notice we're looking at animals here in this option, in this interactive. Okay, now you can pause and get started. All right, now that we have looked at some organisms that and how they may look like other organisms at embryos, at their embryo stage, this is another EOC question. So which of the following is an assumption that can be made about 2 species with comparable embryological development? So A, they have the same number of chromosomal mutations. We're not looking at DNA. B, they are closely related and are thought to share a similar evolutionary history. Maybe. They have identical chromosomes and no structural differences. Again, this is talking about DNA for our genetic code about the chromosomes. D, they will look very similar throughout their lifespan, so from when they are born to adulthood. We know, we just talked about that, about how humans have gills as embryos, or gill-like structure, so that would be definitely incorrect. So these two, since they are talking about genetic code, we're not really looking for that. We're talking about that they had at some point, they're sharing an ancestor and they have similar evolutionary history. This video is posted on Google Classroom. I would like for you to watch this as you're going through your activities today. This is showing you what DNA is and the genes that make up. Remember, we've looked at this before where deoxyribonucleic acid, which is this DNA is short for that, it has 4 nitrogenous bases that make it up. And the order of these bases, they will change what the code is for instruction for cells. And so if you want to just write yourself a little note on your brochure, just as a precursor to prior knowledge, they're going to show it in the video, but A and C bonds together through a hydrogen bond, and then T and G bonds together. Oh my goodness, that is so wrong. This video is A and T and C and G. I always remember it because of at, and then I just remember the other two go together. So the video must have been paused right as it was going together. I'm glad I caught that. All right, our fourth piece of evidence is biochemistry. And so this one, just like that video was kind of showing you, we are going to be looking at the genetic code and comparing pieces of that with other organisms. So we're going to put comparative biochemistry inside our brochure. This is also known as DNA sequencing, because we're looking at different sequences on a DNA strand or portion, or it's called protein sequencing. I'm just going to shorten sequencing. Okay, so just like the same it says, we're looking at the order or the pattern specifically of amino acids. And amino acids have a similar backbone, but there are specific elements that make them a little bit different. And those amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. And we already know that proteins are one of our 4 macromolecules. And proteins are like the worker bees for our cells. They have a bunch of different jobs, and so they're extremely important. And so we've already looked at mutation. So if one of these little guys are a typo, then we could have some change and cause some genetic variation. But the closer the sequencing is between different types of organisms, so we're looking at now, because it's in the word comparative here. So we're comparing sequencing and looking to see how many genes are shared between species. And the more that is shared between them, then the more related they are. The more closer in the evolutionary tree, if you will, they are related. So this would be the most accurate way to determine relatedness of different species. And here on your little diagram, I don't believe on your brochure you have that, but that X is a chromosome. And then you have this strand of DNA. Again, the C's and the G's and the A's and the T's held together with a hydrogen bond. You'll learn about that in chemistry if you take that. But what's really, really important is somewhere on your brochure, let's do it in the middle here, you have DNA that codes for proteins. And just like we saw in our mice, that's going to code for different traits, whether we can see them or not. And so that is kind of our generic way. And so we can, for the mice, we can see the different color of their fur, and that trait indicates that the protein that coded for that trait was slightly different between the white and the dark colored mice. At this point, you need to pause, and there is a link in Google Classroom It's a slight interactive kind of. It's not really a video, but it has really short statements with good images to show you about the common ancestry that's in our DNA. So pause and go through that individually at your desk. There is closed captions, so even if you don't have the audio on, you'll be able to read the statements at the bottom of the screen. All right, so now that we've explored a little bit about ancestry of our DNA, we have what type of evidence do we have when we're looking at biochemistry. And so there is a half sheet for this that you will need. You'll also need your Chromebook, and you can work at your table with your groups in case you have trouble clicking on it, but it's pretty straightforward. Once you open up the interactive phylogenetic tree, it's going to look like this. You can see that these lines are representing what's above them, almost like a concept map. And so the first question says, select 2 organisms with very different traits, like moss that hangs from the trees and chimpanzee, like they would have no relation. So you're going to write the organisms that you choose, and then the screen will tell you the number of genes they have in common. So you'll record that and do that for the rest of these questions as a way to get familiar with the type of evidence we're talking about here. When you get done, you're going to tape this comparative biochem sheet into your notebook with 6C in the corner. All right, have fun exploring. And our last thing we are going to do to analyze for data is actually looking at sequences for a specific protein. And so I do realize that this may be blurry on your half sheets and hard to see the letters. So there is a Google drawing posted in Google Classroom that you can zoom in. You can hit that Control+ to get as close as possible if hard copies were not available. So, or the half sheet is too small. So it just says, note, letters in bold represent amino acids that are identical in all species. Asterisks represent positions that do not have an amino acid present. So when you're comparing 2 species, you're going to count it as a difference between them. So on this bottom of the half sheet, it says, use the full chart above to analyze the number of amino acid differences between a human and these 6 different organisms. And so I was going to do tuna with you guys, and then you can get with your desk table mates and go through it together. But starting with the amino acid position 1 through 8, they both had asterisks between human and tuna. So none of those are different. But starting at amino acid 12 and then 17, I'm at 2, 19, 20, 23, 30, 36, almost missed that one. I'm almost missed 41. I told y'all I have bad eyesight. And 52, GYSY, all the same. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we only have in this sequence 9 differences between a tuna. Interesting. So pause the video, go ahead and finish this assignment. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. We are going to make sure we remember analyzing DNA is the best evidence for us to prove common ancestry. And so we're going to tape this into our notebook as well. And again, 6C. Now you have the rest of class to finish yesterday's evolution handout. If you did not get that submitted, at this point, you can also do your study card for 6C. The due date for this is Thursday, right before our unit test. You will submit it into the tray so that you have it to study for. And then next week, we will be doing 2 days of speciation, which would be 6B standard. And then we have a half day maybe of review, not very long. So you need to make sure that your study card is up to date. Everything but 6B should be done. I'm really looking forward to seeing these and seeing you guys again. All right. Good luck. Have fun.